And we're live. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Business Emergency Room. Fortunate enough to have a guest here, Matt Holden, who's been a large participant of the BER for a number of years. A number of episodes. It feels like years. My God. I think this is episode 8. It's the first one we're actually recording. So right now, basically, we've want to have this one about pivoting. So a lot of people have faced, with the COVID crisis, a lot of people have faced like, what do I do with my business? And so we've been talking to entrepreneurs that have, and other executives who have really faced this and decided, evaluating, should they pivot? How should they pivot? If they should, et cetera. So we wanted to have Matt kind of walk through his experiences, because he's faced a lot of interesting things in the last couple of weeks. And he's come out on top. I'm stealing his thunder there, but he has. And he'll walk you through with all of that. And then we're going to open it up to questions and conversations. So once again, it's if you've got a question, you want to be part of the conversation, just let us know in the chat. You can raise your hand. Eric, our amazing webinar admin, will, you can see his face right there. He will pop you up. He will pop you up onto the screen. All right, so Matt, you want to go?
Oh, all right. Thank you for that, Aaron, and hello to everybody. I've seen and spoken to you, I'm sure, from the other BERs that we've had, and it's good to be able to be speaking to you with my experiences and what we've gone through over the last couple of months, obviously. I've got a startup. This is my 4th startup. It's called Black Opal, and what we do is we provide a credit card for expats and professionals who are moving to the United States, because when you move here, you have the credit rating of 0. You don't have credit, and it's really, really difficult. So when I sold my last startup, Mav Social, in 2017, I took a year off in San Francisco. Do we go back to Australia? Do we stay here? And I really wanted to address this huge challenge that everybody has who moves to the United States. So for the past year, last year we've been doing a lot of technology, because everybody knows what you need to have here in the United States. You need to have a credit score. Well, when you come here from overseas, you have 0. So our technology takes your credit score from your home country, let's say Australia. We convert that to an American FICO score, and then we give you a credit card, a check account to match your projected score here in the United States. So we've sunk a lot of money into that, and that's obviously when anybody's got a startup, you want to keep as much bootstrap money in your pocket as you possibly can to get investors. We're in now the fintech space, so it's a little bit different. There's regulation, there's federal regulations, there's a whole range of things, which makes things not that easy that investors would just simply write a check for. It's a lot more work to get that happening there. So what we did was we looked at how do we actually make that work, attracting new investors, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we've had some good success this year. We've had some soft commits. We're ready to go, and the world stopped. So what do we do? It's like, oh, my Lord. And I tell you, if anybody's got a startup and has been there and is using Bootstrap, you're airhole. That's your wife or your spouse. So our view was that what we're going to do, can you hear me?
Perfectly. Yeah, there's like a small bit that you popped off.
Okay, sorry. So what we did was we were going to make this work regardless. So the credit card it's not like building your own application. There's a couple of companies have done that, and they've all had investments north of $500 million. I'm not one of those, I'm afraid. But looked at is we said rather than reinvent and build what they call the credit card layer for the banking system, we said let's go and get a product off the shelf. Don't customize it. We're going to configure it. It's going to be a rapid implementation, a rapid development. And that's what we've been looking to do. And our partners are Salesforce, SAP, and some middleware vendors who help us put this all together. So the development side was still going along, but the 4 rules that I sort of came up with and I identified in this pivot, do we stay on the course of another $500,000, $600,000 for something that's going to come out Q4 this year, Q1 next year? Or do we start to preserve our cash, which is rule number one? And I always identify for our business, and I'm sure you do as well, is where is the source of the revenue potential? And of course, part of that is then obviously the mission critical objective is to preserve your cash that you've got. So if we were going to go for another burn for another 7 to 8 months, let's have an allowance then to early next year, that's a lot of cash and a lot of risk. So the other side of the business was the people that we're talking to are individuals who are moving to the States. We also speak to a lot of entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs are always having problems in getting additional credit cards and lines of credits, all of those types of things in order. So I was focusing on our customer. What do they need and where are they? Obviously, they're in a great deal of challenge. So PPP was everybody wanted PPP. So what we did was, my pivot was we're still developing our credit card. We've got all our credit cards there. We've got the Black Opal card, which is a metal card, very premium. We've got the what we call our Rose Gold, which didn't come up on here, but there it is. It's a Rose Gold.
Also invisible.
And a few other things. So we've still got those cards going, but in order to generate cash, I still wanted to look at where's our revenue sources coming from? What's going to happen to our customer persona? Are our customers going to change? That was the big question we didn't really know. How close to your core business is the potential pivot? And that was something that was probably the thing I grappled with the most. Do we let our credit card business, software development, fintech just continue and we do something totally different? Or do we have something which is aligned together? And as I spoke to a lot of colleagues, their suggestions were obviously to go further ahead and change your pivot. The greater the degree of the flexibility of changing a pivot, the greater the cost it's going to be to you and the higher the risk. And of course, the last thing is, which is really number one, is I always begin with the end in mind. Where is this pivot going to take us? We don't want to just be for business today. All I do is my role as CEO and founder is I look 4 quarters ahead. I work on a 4-quarter rolling average. I've just found that in startup land, and I learned the hard way with Mav Social, where you're focusing on the today, which is the worst thing to do because right now, focusing on the today is just not what we need. We need to be focusing on what's going to be happening or what do we anticipate might happen there. So what we did was we set up what we call commercial services, the Black Opal commercial services. And that is very similar, and I'm sure each and every one of us have received letters in the mail, credit card offers, finance offers. We were to become basically commercial services as an affiliate marketer for other financial products. And they were products that were then relevant to our core audience, but they also have an impact to come back to our core product, which is our credit card offerings, to be able to be brought in there together. And an example of how that's worked is yesterday we had a partner arrangement with a company. He has 2,100 small business clients. So our view was that we can help them today with our panel of banks that we've partnered with. And we partner with banks to do this because Salesforce is our front-end system. We try to make this a very seamless system because trying to apply for loans, that in itself is a huge challenge. That is a big problem in the market. So we're building now an easier application that we get all the customers' information that we know that all our banks require before we submit loans to them. What normally most people would do who do these types of loan affiliation type systems is they work from home, they get some information from you, they fill in the piece of paper, and then they'll give that documentation to a bank or the lending institution. Invariably, I've never seen one go through without request for more documents. It just doesn't happen. So we've put this all together. We've got a panel of banks here. We've got banks and also lending institutions. Fundwise out of Utah, Celtic Bank also out of Utah, Blue Vine, Rapid Funding, Lightstream, and a few others that we've partnered with. But what we've also done is to expand and minimise risk to us. The business model of consumer lending is exactly the same in the United Kingdom as it is in Australia and New Zealand. A small business venture would go to the website, fill in all the details, upload the documents, and then they would get a loan. So what we did was we said the United Kingdom and Australia are key markets for our core business product. It's also a market for us in the small business arena. So what we've done is we've configured our Salesforce front-end financial services system. We've configured that so that we can then market into Australia. We can market across the United States, and then when we're ready, we can also move into the United Kingdom. So to us, that was it's a right alignment. We're adding services now to our core business, and there is obviously a degree of risk of doing the implementation, changing some of our software development, etc. But what we did was the PPP helped us significantly. When it came out, we were writing 2 or 3 loans a day. It's now trickling down to about 1 loan per day because the money is starting to run out and some of the banks and institutions are just starting to close up shop. The Midwest still has got money. Regions vary. Obviously, East Coast, West Coast is different, but here in Denver, Colorado, which is where we're based now, there's still some money left for the smaller applicants, and that's fine with us. We get a commission on that. All we do is we refer people to the lending institution. We know what they want for a PPP. So we've now got to a stage where we preface all of that so that we can then give that to the institution. Now, for the end, as remember I said, the end, what is the end in mind? What's the end game? This to us is going to actually add really good additional services to our company offering because we do want commercial services. Commercial services are tied to loans or credit cards, mortgages, refinances, and so on and so forth. None of that is different to what our other offerings are because they cross-pollinate one another. And the company I was telling you about in Utah yesterday, they have 2,000 small business offices. Our small business card, which is sort of like a competitor to the American Express card, charter member they call it. Oh, you can't see it, but anyway, it's an American Express type card, but we call it our small business card. So you have a line of credit, $35,000 limit. You get 5 supplementary cards, and that to small business owners is somewhat golden to be able to receive that here in the United States. So far, it's looking good. There's lots of risks associated with it. Our biggest risk, and I'm sure it's the same with everybody, is capitalization. Probably the biggest challenge because we overinvested to build a really good product last year, not anticipating obviously what happened in the first 2 quarters of this year. So it's been a bit of a challenge. In fact, I've spoken to Aaron a lot of times and a lot of other friends who are on the call and participating today. We all reach out and talk to one another to rub those ideas off one another, see if they're, to really give them the sniff test to see if it's going to be flying or it might not work. So that's how I've done that. I've seen some here in Denver, Colorado. I've seen some startups doing they call it a pivot. I mean, a pivot is really, a lot of them are saying, well, they're shutting down that one business, but under the guise of their entity, they're then going to be increasing and doing something else, something totally foreign. There was one company here who was a realtor. We do a lot of work with real estate agents across America. He was a realtor. He shut the realtor down and he was moving into catering. It's like, I don't know correlation of those two, but that's what he felt was the best pivot for him. I didn't think that was probably the best investment for his time because real estate's still kicking along here in the Colorado market and elsewhere across the US. So that's my little journey as to where we went from to and what we're now doing.
That's awesome, Matt. Thank you. I'm going to dissect this a bit with you. So you mentioned something at the very beginning on preserving cash. So first question I have for you is, when do you think, based off what you've seen, you've been this fourth starter for you, when does it make sense to go dormant versus because you could literally, like, there's certain times that you can listen, I just go dormant. I kind of, sometimes you're forced to go dormant, like certain venues, especially in COVID, have to go dormant. They're legally required to. But when does it make sense in your mind to go dormant versus continue to plug along or pivot, et cetera? Just the whole dormant question. Yes or no on dormant? Like, what's your thought on that?
I think dormant has a place, obviously. And for some companies, as you said, I mean, there are some businesses, they're not dormant, they're actually forced to be shut down. Obviously, let's look at the restaurant industry at the moment. They're not gone dormant, there's still businesses there, but they've had to stop for the various reasons. I think it does make sense at some time when you want to go dormant for cash. You can put the business on ice. Depends on what it is, if it's an LLC versus a C Corp, etc. I've had C Corps all since I've ever come to the United States, and they are easy to put into a dormant status at a very relatively limited cost. So it does help you to have the entity sitting there ready to go when you're ready to turn the switch on. Overall, I think the concept of going dormant, just because of what's happening now, I discourage that. I think too many people, rightly so, all of us have felt the impact of this. But if you start looking ahead as to where are we going to be, this is not a financial collapse of the markets. This is not brought about by war and terrorism. This is an unbelievable circumstance that's never really been experienced in the world previously at all. So I would be hanging in there if you possibly can to see what's going to be happening, preserve cash. But the one that I would probably say is going to drive the answer to that question is your customer. Is your customer going to be the same? Is the customer persona going to change significantly? And if it is, then really you should be looking at, well, should we close, stop, dormant, whatever? But if your customer is going to be the same, and our customers, we're actually bringing on additional customers is what we were looking at. Even though we want them in the long term, we weren't projecting to get commercial services for another 2 years. But circumstances were there, opportunity was there. Banks and everybody is actually, they're wanting partners like us right now, obviously. So it presented for us a great opportunity to participate and look at our customers and focus on them to be able to keep the business going.
Fantastic. So on the customer persona, I really want to delve into this. So shameless plug here, we have a crisis workbook that'll eventually be going live. I owe everyone who's already attended the draft of it. That's going to go out. We walk through a lot of this. I want everyone's opinion on this, but I want to open it to everyone that's attending right now. Does anyone have a question on, like, Matt, it can be the Matt and Aaron show here, but I always like to bring in other people. Does anyone right now have a question or comment on customer personas, what they've seen, how they've dealt with this shift, or how they've seen other people dealt with the shift, or any comment on that? So if anyone wants to text us the question, if not, I will, I might just call out on one of you guys to get you on. But anyone right now, open it up here. So if not, I'm actually gonna pick on Charles McCormick here. So he texted us here. So let's get Charles. We can either unmute you or put you on video.
I think I'm unmuted. I don't know about video. I have the video on.
Nice. So Eric, can you promote Charles up here so we can? See.
I just got rejoined. Now I've been promoted to panelist. Oh, this
congratulations!
Is
yeah, you've
right.
You have arrived. You've been promoted.
But I don't get my picture.
Yeah, that's. I think you have to turn.
Personally, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I think you got to actually click the turn on video.
Oh, I thought I did. No. Hold on.
And let me
start my video.
There he is.
Oh, I don't see me. Hold on.
I see you perfectly.
Here. All right. How are we doing?
Doing great.
Excellent. So, Matt, thanks for your presentation. And Aaron, thanks for putting this together.
My pleasure. So, Charles, you've seen, just not only through your clients and also your work with the Startup Academy, you've seen a ton of groups ton of companies evaluating customers' personas, trying to pivot. You've also, like, you run your own firm. What do you think, like, what you want to tell a story of something that you found really interesting from either, obviously keep it confidential as one of your clients or yourself,
Sure.
or just what wisdom do you got on this?
Say that again.
What kind of tips would you give people? You can either give a story that you think that'd be great that people learn from, or just
Sure.
tips. Yeah.
And I want to apologize. I only caught the last few minutes of Matt's speech, so I don't want to be duplicative. But I think if what we're talking about is, how do you react to the COVID environment? I think the reality is that no one knows. And as I heard Matt pointing out toward the end of this, as much as there are some businesses that just by their nature are devastated, right? So who would want to be running a restaurant right now? Just, it's impossible to pivot, really. There are plenty of businesses, and I'm sure the Black Opal card is a good example of one that Matt talked about, where opportunities are arising. And, it comes in areas like, if you look at the stock price of Zoom, the company that produced this video cast, I mean, it's just gone through the roof, for no particularly apparent reason other than we've all just moved online. And so usually what you see is a business will pivot. But what we're seeing now globally is that the business community is pivoting. Society is pivoting. And we don't know how long that'll be. We don't know how permanent that'll be. All that we know is that we are where we are right now, and we have to make the most of it. And, for some people like Aaron in professional services, that's not a huge adjustment. You've got to work from your basement and you got your kids running around. But, in terms of what you do, a lot of what you're doing in your basement, you were doing in the office. You're talking on the phone, you're working on the computer, you're doing those sorts of things. And so if you've got a business like that, I think that, this is much more muted than if you're doing something that requires a lot of in-person contact. I mean, who would want to be a dentist right now? Right? I mean, think about how you're going to restart your business in such a close personal context, or a restaurant or any sort of hospitality business, or if you're running a small hotel. And so, the best advice is kind of to Matt's point, is continue to take feedback from your customers and understand that as much as, a lot of, maybe 80% of what you're going to be hearing are concerns and challenges and, frankly, crises, but 20% of it is actually going to be opportunities. And that's where you're going to build the business that you're going to take forward out of this.
So Charles, on that, completely aligned, completely agree. The question would be, let's talk about that 20%. So the 20% really makes me curious of what happens. Like, do you make a large capital investment? There's one thing for time, but what do you like? And especially since we don't know where the world is moving. So there's a difference between I'm going to offer a product set like Matt, Matt, how much of a additional capital investment did you make? And I'm not asking for dollars amount, but like percentages, like versus time investment and strategy investment. So it's do you throw down, like, do you go out and that's my question, because there's enough that's certain now that we know for like the next 6, maybe the next year that's going to happen, but it's a little bit harder to make a long-term investment saying, I think this is a 3 to 5 year bet.
Well, to answer that, I know Matt's got some thoughts on this as well, but, to answer that, I think that's always been the environment for capital expenditures. I mean, if I look back at, purchasing managers surveys, during 2019, you'd see a lot of the same themes, which is we're concerned about, capital expenditures and where the economy is going to go, and is there going to be a recession and all sorts of things like that. So, I think the more, to Matt's point, the more you can tie any sort of capital expenditure to customer demand and customer needs, the more prudent that's going to be. And what I mean is that, if you look at real estate's a great example. So at the top of a real estate market, people just build things, right? They build houses. They build houses on spec. And, the theory is, look, in a market like this, if I put product on the market, people will buy it and there's nothing to worry about. That's never a great idea, even though sometimes it works, because when the market goes away from you, then you're really stuck. So if you're tying your capital expenditures to what you see as demonstrated customer demand, it's really not a function of the cost. It's really more a function of what the demand is, and what, way to think about it, I think the way a lot of people think about this is, what's the ROI? And so if you're making even a very significant capital expenditure, but you can calculate an ROI of less than 2 years, that's probably something worth thinking about. On the other hand, even a cheap capital expenditure that has an ROI that's indeterminable or many, many years in the future is probably not a good idea. So it's not a function of cost so much as it is utility. And one way to think about that, it's not the only way, is in terms of ROI. Another way to think about it, and this is not unique to the COVID situation or anything like that, but in any recession, there's an opportunity to build when prices are relatively low. Right now, you'd have to imagine that, any project that you were thinking about doing 6 months ago or 9 months ago is probably going to be more economical to do today than it was then. And that's an opportunity if you're willing to be in it for the long haul. Because obviously, Aaron, to your point, you're not going to get a payoff in 2 or 3 months. But effectively, if someone said that you could buy a car that you've been looking at for months at 40% off the price that you saw 6 months ago, you'd probably want to buy it. And I think business opportunities can be gauged in a similar way.
Very much so. Aaron, also, Charles, on top of that, what we did was went to our vendors, because remember how I said earlier in the piece, we said we were going to go with as commercialized, off-the-shelf product as we possibly can. Well, I can tell you what we've done is, with one of those vendors that I mentioned, we've secured an 85% discount off their list price. And that's because I knew also, another reason, I knew when their end of financial year was. So if you're anybody who's buying enterprise-based software, you all know those guys live or die by when they're going to close those sales. So we did 85% off the first one. That was over $100,000 in savings. The second one discounted the price somewhat because a bit more of a transactional model, but they gave us rebates, and they were development rebates. Started at $20,000, went to $60,000, which is where Charles and I are doing some work with these people right now. I went back to them just the other day and I said, I need another $100,000 rebate to implement this software. And I got it. I mean, we've got this. So we've saved almost $300,000 of what we would have paid, to Charles's point, what we would have paid 12 months ago to what we're paying today. We saved a heck of a lot of money, but comes back to rule number one: preserve your cash and do the weighing up. Is it a good ROI? Are you going to benefit from it? Because there's no point buying something unless it's going to make you more money. And that's what you've got to look at there. And that's, to Charles' point, that's what we've done, and it's worked quite well.
That's awesome. So let's, Eric, can you promote Mauro here? Mauro had a question for you, Matt. We'll just see if you can, there we go. Mauro.
There's Mauro. Yep.
And thank you, Aaron. It's a great program. Appreciate you organizing this. Matt, building off of something that Charles raised, he had mentioned about the fact that right now the pandemic may or may not have made some fundamental changes to how businesses are going to operate going forward. We don't know to what extent we're going to go back to, quote, normal, like we were before we were all forced to go online like this. So my question is there a risk of over pivoting? And for someone in your position where you're trying to start up, where you may have an existing business that needs to make an adjustment, how do you understand and gauge where that line would be?
And that's a good question, because it's very true. Very true. But if you recall, what I said was one of the things about a pivot, it needs to be close to your core business. I mean, I was saying, what's the degree of separation of our commercial services to our core business? And really, it wasn't that much. For us, it wasn't that much. Remember, I talked about someone who's going into the catering business. Is like, he sees business opportunity there. That's great. But that's a huge risk because we don't know what the new norm is going to be. And we just do not know at this stage. And of course, it's calculated investment for anybody looking at it, obviously at a pivot. You've got to do the math. That's the most important thing. But there has to be a degree of uncertainty and flexibility on behalf of management to be able to react and adapt to circumstances as they arise.
So I'll actually add something to that, Mauro. I kind of view it as, are you chasing a fad? Are you chasing, and you can make a lot of money on fads, right? But something with fad is that you need to be a first mover. Like I always view the equation of a fad, and this is just me, to profit off it. You have to be a first mover, and if you do any type of significant capital investment you're expecting an ROI on, whatever that, it has to be able to be repurposed. So if you're a manufacturer and you're making a certain type of a line of clothing, and you can easily repurpose all those materials to a different line of clothing. By the way, don't ask me for fashion advice. I think you've seen how I dress on these things, but I could see, like, if all repurposing, that I would see. But where I get, and it's interesting, is Charles made a really great point, is, we're always in always changing times. This happens to be an extreme changing time, but you are in, so I would say I agree with that. The only thing I would say on the catering side of things is, if you happen to have a background in catering or something like that, and you saw, but yeah, I would agree. If shutting down one business, opening up another, you're welcome to do that. But I'll go into things. Are you chasing a fad? And that's still fine. Just realize it's a temporary type of business, and careful of your capital expenditures and how you're going to make up that. That's the advice
just to underscore that. I mean, I'm hearing this a lot, actually. We're a COVID business. All right. You're not a COVID business. I don't care what you are. Even if you're a hospital emergency room, you're not a COVID business. And so, COVID's going to present some short-term opportunities. And this actually speaks to the point about CapEx, right? It sounds like, you'd want to pour a lot of CapEx into the quote unquote COVID opportunity. In the long term, I don't think that's really going to work out too well for you, right? COVID's going to happen, and you're going to need to adjust the way that you do business. And there may be some opportunities that come out of it, but you take the Black Opal card, or you take what Aventus AG does, right? We're going to use credit cards during and after the COVID crisis. We're going to need financial services during and after the COVID crisis. And, I think we've all probably heard one too many people who have come back to us and said, oh, we're a COVID business. You're really not, right? We're all getting through the COVID crisis the best way that we can. We're all changing our work practices. We may be changing our product and service offerings. Plenty of law firms, for examples, and accounting firms have set up COVID response task forces. I'm not sure what a COVID response task force is, right? There is no COVID law. There is no COVID gap, but it's a great marketing approach, and if it works, great. But I don't think you need to change your fundamental business to pivot into COVID, because, to Matt's point and to Aaron's point as well, this is going to end. This isn't even, a great example would be like Y2K.
He took the words out of my mouth.
There was a fad. There was a great thing. Okay. If you hit Y2K in 1997, you had a solid 3 years to sell very expensive consulting services until everyone on the planet figured out that there was no Y2K problem. You had solid 3 years. I don't feel like we have 3 years to exploit the COVID situation. In some ways we'll never be the same, but I don't think we're going to be in this environment of, retail closed, cities shut down, people afraid to congregate with other people. I don't think that's a long-term trend, and I don't know, how much we need to invest in something like that.
Yeah, it's
True.
all great, interesting points. Yeah, I'll go back to I think that, and this is what I always recommend, and Matt, you said it well, and Charles and Mara, you've echoed this, is on the customer persona side of things, is you should, it's a healthy exercise anyways. What does your customer need? Like, are you providing it? Is the backbone of your business able to provide that? And if so, then it's just meeting very temporary market conditions. Sometimes those market conditions, and so it could be, and I think that's much different than, like I would think about, like, are you building up a significant amount of facility to create a product for something by the time it gets out there, that thing might be gone, or it's already been addressed by even lower cost providers. I think what's interesting is like if you decided like to, I found a fascinating pivot is all the organizations right now. I think I don't attest. I'm not attesting to this, but I think like bars and other alcohol distributors are manufacturing, creating a can sanitizer. That's not their core business, but they're repurposing machinery and processes to do that. And then I highly doubt they're going to be competing with Purell. But once this is over, and odds are they're going to go back to what they were doing in the past. So I could see, I don't even know if that's a pivot as much as just like going down a twisty river and like navigating the river.
Well, that's a great example, Aaron, because there's very little incremental capex. You're using your existing manufacturing capacity to do something slightly different. So there's probably some improvements, some capex, but it's not like you're building, a sanitizer facility from scratch at your brewery.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me start to think, and this is where I start to think about what's the appetite in the future and for like long-term investment and it's nothing to do with COVID, but and then this really puts to, all forecasts, what's the old saying, is like all forecasts look great until something happens, just like I think Mike Tyson used to have that saying, like, that's all, you have a plan, you go into the ring, and then I'm botching this horrible, and then you get punched in the face. Or the military thought is that, you have, everything's fine until the first shot's fired. So I don't want to be anti long-term investment. I think that I think instead what it is that you're just like anything, you're placing a bet on very specific customer fundamentals and hoping those certain fundamentals exist for the time for you able to get the ROI. Probably those conditions have already always existed. We just haven't really thought about them in these terms. And sometimes this is a clarifying statement. So let me go over this. So I think we covered everything from preserving cash to keeping dormant, anatomy of a customer, from great pivoting. Mara, I wanted to thank you for that great question. That was awesome. Anyone else? I just want to see anyone else have a comment or a question. See a couple of people here still on. I don't want to call anyone out, but I know you've all got some great insight into here. Would love to have one of you here. If not, I'm actually gonna grab someone here who I see on that. Actually, Daniel, I see you here. You're probably the best data analytics guy I know. What do you? I want to just call you out of the blue here, from a math side of things, and actually so Daniel, I got a question for you. What is the math? So from a math side of things, right? What is like? What are we taught? What's like a distilled math way of like viewing some of this? Like, are we talking about, like, I'm gonna throw out some ridiculous finance terms, like a high beta? Like, what are we like? What's your mathematical wisdom on this?
Actually, listening to some of the talking today, the mathematical wisdom or the statistical wisdom is that we're dealing with predictions with very wide error bars. And this is the problem, right? This is the problem that all the modelers have had. Right? You put out a model, it's a really good model, and someone says to you, what's the best guess of how many people are going to get sick or God forbid, how many people are going to die of COVID. And you say, okay, the best guess is, X number by August 1st. But the fact of the matter is there are 16 assumptions that go into that model, some of which we have control over, how much social distancing are we going to do, and so on and so forth. And depending upon how you change those assumptions, the output of the model is going to change dramatically. And we just don't know. We don't know what people are going to do. And we don't know what the next meteor that's going to hit is going to look like, right? I mean, this whole conversation will be dramatically different depending upon whether Moderna's vaccine, the next round of their vaccine trials, turns out to be positive or negative, right? This could, theoretically, this could all end rather quickly. That would be great. So those error bars are very, very hard. And then the other piece that goes along with the error bars is, and you guys have been talking a lot about this, you phrase it in terms of risk, which is that you don't know what the price is, what the price might be of making a certain investment. I mean, obviously, you know the price right now of the investment, but you have no idea what the return is going to be. And that, I think, generally leads people to be pretty cautious. It obviously opens up a lot of opportunity, but that it's hard to know, what are going to be good paths of opportunity, what are just going to be dead ends.
So what I
but
should
it
have done
is.
was done the.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry, I should have done the. Actually, I apologize for this. We're getting new at this. Is like proponent. I should have done the intro beforehand. Daniel is our resident data analytics expert and also runs a killer data analytics practice. I think Stanford PhD and a whole bunch of other amazing letters. If I had and credentials I had behind my name, my mother would be even more prouder than me as she is right now. So it's
Thank you.
I'm gonna pepper you with a question here, and this is kind of so with high error bars, with high uncertainty, but you still have to make long-term plans. You can't put your head in the sand. You just can't say, well, I still have the plan. We're all laymen here, right? We're not what advice do you give us for long-term planning? Like, what should we do based off of, stock market will call it high volatility. We've got significant uncertainty, lots of I'm going to probably botch I say multivariate, which just means, a couple of extra letters, high coefficient, right? Good. High different reaction, lots of volatility. We have no idea where things are going, but you still have to long-term plan. You still have to be able to model something. What's your advice?
So I don't know anything more than you guys know. I can put it into an equation, but conceptually, the answer to that question, I don't have a better answer than anyone else. And my models aren't going to give a better answer than anyone else, except in two ways. One, it is good to look at data. So when we were talking earlier about credit cards, right, it sounds like the core of that business you were discussing today was, seeing a problem that customers had out there. You knew about it, you experienced it yourself, I guess coming from Australia. And so you can say, hey, listen, if I build a product that addresses that need, there's going to be a marketplace for it. Okay, so you knew your customer. And I actually do a fair amount of work in designing credit cards and whatnot, because the way you do that is you go out and you survey potential customers and you see what they want. And doing that kind of step where you can do it rigorously, and all I do is add on the rigor to the common sense step, and ends up being very important. The other thing, and again, this is common sense, not statistics, that you could put models behind your common sense intuitions, which is to say, okay, I know we're in a volatile environment. If I make a wrong move, am I in a position to recover? And by a wrong move, I don't mean you made a bad decision. I just mean it didn't turn out well, right? So you can make a really good decision, but that assessment of am I able to recover, right? You're not going to go to Foxwoods or Vegas, or you're not going to go now no matter what, but you're not going to go to the high roller table if your income's $50,000 a year because you simply are not in a position to afford a giant loss, and that's going to open up certain avenues and close down certain avenues. So being aware of your own risk tolerance, right? Any retirement manager will ask you the same kind of thing, and what you'll tell the retirement manager, okay, I can deal with this, I can't deal with that, and then they'll go about quantifying that to some degree with you. So I think it's not really a statistical question, though again, we can put it in language of statistics if you collect the data, but it's an assessment of what, being honest about what the odds are of success, what the costs are of following a certain path of success, and what your ability is to recover if things don't work out well. And those are standard, straightforward questions out of any business or startup manual. But if you can be A, honest about those and asking and answering them, and B, if you can quantify them, all the better.
So while I've got you here, I've got Charles, I've got Matt. I'm going to ask one final question here. Thank you, by the way, Daniel. Thank you. That was awesome. As our resident math, logic, modeling expert, just great guy and good friend. I appreciate. So let's using a poker term here then. When does it make sense to go all in, like on something like this? Like from Matt to Charles to Daniel, when you say when does it make sense to say, listen, forget recover, be darned. Like I've got to make this call and I'm going to do it no matter what. And there is whatever analogy you want to use. I'm burning the bridges behind me. I'm Cortez. I've done whatever. It's when do you do a decision like that? Matt, I'm going to ask you first.
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, everybody has to weigh up in the assessment of what they're going to be doing. To my mind, and what we did was there were no opportunities to do this twice. We had to make this one move work and be successful. There's no fallback. We're all alone. We got to make it work. So I did a lot of assessment, weighing up the odds, looking at all sorts of things. One very funny thing we did find is even though we sort of stopped some of our marketing to our core business, our credit card potential members, we've seen an increase. It's been a 15% increase in the last 3 weeks of people wanting more information about our product, which we thought extremely strange. But when you think about it, people are still moving to America. It's even harder when you move to America now, which is a better opportunity for us. So we assessed which way to go. Do we stay with our core product, which is our credit cards? Do we then divert and have that side offering, which is our commercial services? We made the decision on commercial services because we'd saved enough money. That was the decision. Harnessed everybody around that. And I said, this is where we're going to go. Let's go.
Right. Charles, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it kind of comes down to how you interpret the term all in. So if, what you mean is that you should pursue only one business line at the expense of others, I mean, most business textbooks would tell you that's not an ideal strategy, no matter what it is you're doing, because you need to diversify product line and service offerings and things like that. But if what you mean by all in is, not doing anything half-ass, then you should always go all in. And so, I guess the advice is sort of paradoxically, you should never go all in the sense that you should, neglect innovation. But you should always go all in the sense that if you're going to do something, you should give it your full effort. And it sort of ties back to, why do so many businesses fail? One reason that they fail is because people do them sort of half-heartedly. They make half an effort and they expect a tremendous result. And when that doesn't happen, they just give up. So, in that sense, you should always go all in. But again, this has nothing to do with COVID. This has more to do with business fundamentals than it does with the particular circumstances that we're looking at right now.
So Dan, any comments? And I'll conclude with a few of my own.
Sure, I'll throw in. So in data analysis, in particular, in predictive modeling world, one of the most common strategies for finding an ideal or close to ideal solution to a problem is something called simulated annealing. And the concept is you're trying to find the best solution, right? Let's say the best configuration of a credit card offer that's going to maximize revenue or profit, whatever. And there may be 30,000 different potential combinations, okay? So you got to search through all those combinations. And you don't know beforehand which one is going to be the best. And it turns out one of the best strategies for doing that is to start somewhere, see how good one combination is, and then make small adjustments, okay? So you've got your core business, you make some small adjustments, and you see if that improves, you keep on going in that direction. If it's not improving, you pivot a little bit and you go in another direction. And that turns out to be really good, except if you want to do really well, every now and then you have to jump. Because if you're doing these small pivots, you're not seeing what the space might look like in a completely new neighborhood. And so from an algorithm perspective, the best thing to do is to make these small pivots and every now and then jump around to see if there's some big thing that you're missing. And it becomes an art to just balance to balance those two. And it works when you have good feedback and quick feedback from the marketplace. And if you don't have feedback, it becomes very, very hard. But getting that feedback turns out to be critical.
That's great. So I would summarize a lot of what you said, and a lot of my thoughts is that a lot of a big bet or an all-in is risk taking. You can mitigate that risk by good data, knowing your customer, doing your best to understand in any type of uncertain world what's going on, understanding business fundamentals. And I would say the last thing to think about, and this is also like from the type of risk you're going to take, is your stakeholder. So you've got investors who've placed a certain amount of money in you. You've got employees, you've got vendors who are also depending on you. And if what you're going to do is going to be of such a risk that there's maybe a point of no return, soliciting their support and their feedback beforehand to get them behind you is always a much better solution in my mind, unless where possible, where feasible, as opposed to just making this call, dragging them all along with you. And then, if something doesn't work out now, you've enhanced your chance of it not working out doubly, because now you've got people who haven't signed on for this type of move. Sometimes you have to do that regardless, but where you can, have that in there. So this is, gentlemen, thank you. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you all for being a part of this. You've been great. This has been recorded. We will post this later. You'll see all the good stuff. Your feedback is always appreciated. Please email us at talk@aventusag.com. You can register for these anytime possible. I'd love to hear back from you. We'll love to see you all next week. And thank you all again for participating. And above all else, Matt, thank you. Thank you for being the guest. Thank you for all your wisdom. Much. Charles, thank you for all your added questions and commentary. Daniel, thank you for the surprise visit at the end. Surprise visit because I surprised you. And Mario, thank you also for your comments as well. Thank you all again. I keep saying thank you. Eric, that's a wrap. You can stop us now.